The high-stakes world of European venture capital inside a premier Frankfurt investment firm proves that loyalty is just a commodity to be traded for a higher profit margin. My name is Ethan Vance, and I am 34 years old, working as the senior risk analyst at the continental headquarters of Mercer Capital. One rainy Thursday evening, while performing a deep forensic audit on our newly acquired green energy portfolio, I stumbled upon a parallel accounting network. The hidden digital ledgers showed that over 95 million euros of institutional investor funds had been systematically funneled into a shadow bank in Cyprus. My heart dropped when I decrypted the final authorization codes, because the digital footprint belonged exclusively to my brilliant managing director and longtime mentor Victoria Mercer. Victoria was a legendary figure in the European financial sector who had guided my career for 5 years and whom I trusted completely with my professional future. I knew that exposing this level of systemic corruption would instantly trigger a catastrophic corporate war, but my duty to the investors left me with no other choice. I copied the incriminating offshore data onto a secure personal drive and prepared to present the findings to the external regulatory board the following morning. The hook dropped at midnight when I received an automated security alert stating that my executive access credentials to the Mercer network had been permanently revoked due to a severe data breach protocol. I rushed to the Frankfurt office tower, only to find the entire floor surrounded by private corporate security teams wearing black suits and earpieces. Victoria stood in the center of the glass boardroom, holding a falsified compliance report that accused me of orchestrating the entire 95 million euro theft myself. The first massive twist hit me when the local federal police entered the room and pulled out an arrest warrant backed by forged emails showing that I had negotiated a secret payoff with a rival conglomerate in Munich. I realized with absolute horror that Victoria had engineered a flawless defensive trap to sacrifice me as the ultimate corporate scapegoat to protect her fraudulent empire. As the officers moved forward to secure the handcuffs, a sudden power failure plunged the entire skyscraper into complete darkness, causing immediate confusion throughout the floor. A hand grabbed my arm in the dark, pulling me through a hidden maintenance door and down an emergency concrete staircase before the backup generators could kick in. My rescuer was Christian, a rogue infrastructure engineer who had been secretly fired by Victoria a month ago after he questioned the safety of the Cyprus transactions. Christian threw a set of car keys into my hand and told me that the police had already blocked the main roads, but the underground subway tunnels were still open for another 10 minutes. I sprinted into the wet. I boarded a cargo train heading toward Brussels, using a fake employee badge that Christian had provided during our frantic escape from the office tower. As the train crossed the Belgian border, the burner phone in my pocket buzzed with an incoming encrypted video call from an unlisted international satellite network. The screen activated to reveal the face of Marcus Mercer, the estranged younger brother of Victoria, who had been living in self-imposed exile in Geneva for nearly a decade. Marcus looked at me with a cold, calculating smile and told me that the 95 million euros was never meant to stay in Cyprus. The shocking twist came when Marcus revealed that Victoria was using the stolen funds to buy a controlling interest in a French cybersecurity defense firm that monitored the entire European banking grid. If Victoria finalized the acquisition during the upcoming emergency shareholder summit in Luxembourg, she would possess the ultimate power to erase any financial fraud from existence. Marcus offered to give me the decryption keys to Victoria's main shadow bank if I agreed to help him launch a hostile boardroom takeover to reclaim his birthright. We needed to intercept a physical hardware key that contained the final transaction signatures, which was currently locked inside a high-security safe aboard Victoria's private super yacht docked in Monaco. Just as I agreed to the alliance, the cargo train screeched to a violent halt, and the metal doors were ripped open by a tactical assault team hired by the Mercer family. I grabbed my bag and dived out the opposite side of the train car into the darkness, realizing that the corporate hunt had officially entered its most dangerous phase. The bright floodlights of the tactical team cut through the midnight fog as Christian and I scrambled down the steep gravel embankment beside the railway tracks. We could hear the barking of guard dogs and the shouting of mercenaries behind us, their heavy boots crushing the dry leaves as they fanned out across the Belgian countryside. Christian pulled me into a hidden drainage pipe that ran beneath a local highway, forcing us to crawl through freezing water while the search teams passed directly overhead. The hook arrived when we finally emerged near a deserted petrol station and found a luxury sports car waiting for us, with the engine idling and the headlights turned off. Sitting in the driver's seat was none other than Julianne, Victoria's personal executive assistant, who looked at us with a calm expression and told us to get in if we wanted to see the next sunrise. Julianne slammed her foot on the accelerator, tearing down the empty autobahn toward the French border, while the car's digital dashboard scanned for police radar anomalies. I watched her suspiciously, knowing that she had been Victoria's most loyal shadow for years and had access to every confidential file inside Mercer Capital. The first massive twist of the night occurred when Julianne handed me an encrypted tablet that showed a live stream of my mother house in Munich being searched by private investigators. Julianne confessed that she was not helping us out of kindness, but because Victoria had recently discovered that Julianne was secretly feeding information to the Federal Regulatory Board. Victoria had already authorized a cleanup protocol, meaning Julianne was next on the elimination list, and her only chance of survival was to use my knowledge to destroy the Mercer Empire. Before we arrived at the sun-drenched marina of Monaco, just as the morning sun began to reflect off the massive white hull of Victoria's private superyacht, the Sovereign Spirit. The vessel was heavily guarded by elite maritime security personnel, and entering through the main gangway without an electronic biometric pass was completely impossible. Julianne used her executive credentials to override the yacht's automated maintenance schedule, triggering a false fuel leakage alarm that forced half of the security crew to evacuate onto the dock. Christian and I used the temporary distraction to slip onto the lower deck via a small supply boat, moving silently through the luxurious narrow corridors toward the master stateroom. The next major hook dropped when we unlocked the stateroom door and found the high-security safe already wide open, completely empty of the hard. I stared at the empty velvet interior of the safe, while the yacht's automated security speakers suddenly activated, locking all the reinforced steel cabin doors and trapping us inside the master stateroom. The massive digital television on the wall flickered to life, revealing the cold, unyielding face of Victoria sitting in a private office overlooking the European Parliament in Brussels. Victoria smiled, informing us that she had moved the hardware key to a secure diplomatic pouch that was already on its way to the Luxembourg summit via an armored convoy. The major twist hit me like a physical blow when Julianne's phone buzzed with a confirmation message showing that her secret bank accounts had just been credited with 10 million euros from the Mercer corporate fund. Julianne looked at me with a cold, triumphant. Christian used a small thermal cutting tool from his technical gear to shatter the electronic locks of the stateroom window, allowing us to dive into the deep blue waters of the Mediterranean just as the guards opened fire. We swam beneath the private docks until we reached a secluded public beach, our clothes soaked and our bodies exhausted, but our determination completely unbroken. We knew that the final battle would take place in Luxembourg in less than 6 hours, where the emergency shareholder summit was scheduled to finalize the hostile takeover of the entire European banking grid. Marcus Mercer was already waiting for us at a private airfield near Nice, holding a secondary decryption program that could intercept the diplomatic pouch data if we could get close enough to the convoy. We rented a high-powered motorcycle and raced along the dangerous mountain passes toward France, knowing that a single mistake would end our journey permanently. The high-speed chase along the cliffside roads of the French Riviera ended at a private hangar where Marcus Mercer was waiting next to a sleek twin-engine corporate helicopter. Marcus did not waste any time, grabbing our wet bags and shoving us into the cabin as the rotors began to spin with a deafening roar. He connected his military-grade laptop to the aircraft's satellite array, tracking the GPS coordinates of the armored convoy that was currently moving through the Alsace region toward Luxembourg. The hook arrived when Marcus showed us that Julianne had not just betrayed us for 10 million euros, but was actually the biological daughter of the French billionaire who was financing Victoria's entire corporate coup. This meant that the betrayal on the super yacht was a coordinated family theater designed to clear out any independent risk. The helicopter flew low over the dense forests of eastern France, avoiding commercial aviation radar by maintaining a dangerous altitude just above the tree line. As we approached the Luxembourg border, Christian noticed 3 black armored transport vehicles moving in a tight defensive formation along a secluded mountain highway below us. Marcus explained that the middle vehicle contained the diplomatic pouch with the physical hardware key that could authorize the 95 million euro transfer. The first major twist of the afternoon occurred when a sudden barrage of localized electromagnetic pulses disabled our helicopter's main navigation systems, causing the cockpit displays to flash red before dying completely. Victoria had anticipated a mid-air interception and had equipped her security convoy with military jamming technology that was now. The pilot managed to execute a rough emergency landing in an open meadow, just a few hundred meters from the highway, the heavy impact snapping the helicopter's landing gear. Christian and I broke through the emergency side window, dragging a semi-conscious Marcus into the high grass just as the helicopter fuel tank erupted into a massive ball of orange fire. We ran toward the highway using the thick black smoke as a natural screen to blind the security guards who were stepping out of the armored vehicles to inspect the crash site. I noticed that the driver of the lead armored car had left his cabin door open to look at the explosion with his binoculars, leaving the engine running. I did not hesitate, sprinting across the asphalt and jumping into the armored driver's seat, while Christian secured Marcus in the reinforced passenger cabin. I slammed the armored vehicle into reverse, ramming the middle transport car at full speed and forcing it off the road into a concrete barrier. The impact deployed the middle vehicle's emergency security systems, automatically popping the rear cargo doors open and sending the silver diplomatic pouch sliding across the wet asphalt. Christian leaned out of the passenger window, using a mechanical grabber tool to snatch the pouch from the ground, just as the mercenary team began firing heavy automatic weapons at our bulletproof glass. I shifted into drive, flooring the accelerator and tearing down the highway toward the city center of Luxembourg, where the emergency summit was already beginning. The next hook dropped when we opened the diplomatic pouch and found that the hardware key was flashing a digital warning sequence, indicating it had been remotely set to self-destruct. Christian used his advanced electronic bypass tools to freeze the self-destruct countdown at 90 seconds, buying us just enough time to reach the European Financial Convention Center. The entire district was blocked by international media teams and corporate elite vehicles, the glass facade of the convention hall glowing under the gray European sky. We abandoned the damaged armored car in a VIP parking slot, walking calmly through the side service entrance, while wearing the security uniforms we had taken from the convoy drivers. The major twist hit us when we entered the main auditorium and saw Victoria already standing at the center podium, confidently presenting the green energy merger to hundreds of continental investors. Sitting directly behind her in the front row of the board of directors was Julianne, who was. I walked down the main aisle of the auditorium, removing my security helmet and holding the silver hardware key high in the air, so every investor and media camera could see it. The entire room fell into an absolute hush as Victoria stopped speaking mid-sentence, her face turning from supreme arrogance to frozen panic within a single second. I shouted into the nearest television microphone that the entire green energy merger was a fraudulent cover operation funded by stolen institutional reserves from the Cyprus Shadow Network. The hook dropped when Julianne calmly stood up, tapped her tablet twice, and activated the building's automated security protocol, causing thick steel shutters to seal every exit door in the auditorium. She smiled at the crowd, announcing that the investors began to panic as 20 armed private guards entered from the stage wings, their weapons pointed directly at the crowd to prevent anyone from moving toward the podium. Victoria demanded that I hand over the hardware key immediately, stating that if I refused, her legal team would launch a prearranged bankruptcy protocol that would permanently wipe out the retirement funds of millions of European citizens. The massive twist occurred when Marcus Mercer stepped out from the back of the stage, holding a satellite telephone that was connected directly to the governors of the European Central Bank in Frankfurt. Marcus revealed that he had used the last 90 seconds of the countdown to route the hardware key signal through an emergency regulatory loophole, freezing all of Mercer Capital's assets globally. The digital screens behind Victoria suddenly glitched, replacing the green energy presentation with a live feed of the federal police raiding the Mercer headquarters back in Frankfurt. Every single one of Victoria's hidden offshore accounts was being displayed on national television in real time, exposing her network of bribes, political payouts, and systemic fraud to the entire world. The armed security guards realized their employer accounts were completely frozen, and they would never receive their multi-million euro fees, so they slowly lowered their weapons and retreated through the service exits. Victoria collapsed into her executive chair, her empire completely destroyed in front of the global financial elite, while the federal authorities finally breached the auditorium doors to place her under arrest. Julianne tried to slip through the panicked crowd of investors, but Christian blocked her path with a compliance warrant signed by the European Anti-Fraud Commission. As the police led Victoria and Julianne away in handcuffs, Marcus turned to me with a cold, calculating expression that reminded me exactly of his sister. He thanked me for my service to the Mercer family, but then pushed a new corporate contract into my hands that completely stripped me of my seniority and relegated me to a minor compliance role in a distant branch office. The ultimate twist arrived when I looked at the contract and realized that Marcus had used the frozen asset protocol to buy up the remaining distressed shares himself, turning him into the new, undisputed dictator of Mercer Capital. I looked at Marcus and laughed, refusing to sign the contract because I had anticipated his betrayal from the moment we boarded his private helicopter in France. Before entering the auditorium, Christian and I had modified the hardware key code to ensure that the 95 million euros did not go to Marcus or back to the Mercer vaults. The money had been entirely rerouted into an independent, decentralized trust fund owned exclusively by the original green energy developers who had been cheated by Victoria 5 years ago. I walked out of the Luxembourg Convention Center into the fresh evening air, a free man with a clean conscience, knowing that while I no longer had a corporate title, I had executed the most perfect financial heist in European history. The clean slate did not last long, because by Tuesday morning, the entire European financial market was reeling from the sudden vacuum left by the collapse of Mercer Capital. I was sitting in a quiet cafe in Brussels, enjoying my first morning of peace, when a sleek black limousine pulled up to the curb and two men in diplomatic suits requested my presence. They drove me to the heavily guarded complex of the European Commission, where a senior regulatory director, named Eleanor Vance, was waiting for me inside a soundproof briefing room. Eleanor looked at me with sharp, analytical eyes and explained that while I had saved the green energy funds, I had inadvertently triggered a massive liquidity crisis across 3 major German banks. The hook arrived when she revealed that an anonymous entity operating out of Zurich was currently buying up the compromise. Eleanor offered me a position as a special federal investigator with full diplomatic immunity, tasking me with tracking down the true identity of the Zurich entity before the upcoming market opening on Friday. She provided me with a highly secure quantum laptop that had direct access to the encrypted transaction backbones of the Swiss interbank clearing system. The first major twist of the afternoon occurred when I logged into the network and analyzed the digital signatures used to purchase the distressed bank debt. The master authorization code did not belong to a foreign government or a hidden billionaire, but was a highly complex, algorithmic sequence that I had written myself during my early years at Mercer Capital. I realized with absolute certainty that only one person could have stolen that specific software from my private server, my former corporate partner and close friend David, who had supposedly passed away in a Swiss mountaineering accident 2 years ago. Christian and I immediately caught a high-speed train to Zurich, tracking the active source of the algorithmic trades to a deeply buried server farm located beneath an old watch factory near Lake Zurich. We breached the facility using Christian's specialized electronic keys, navigating through rows of humming silver server racks that were generating an incredible amount of heat. The hook dropped when we reached the central control room and found David alive, sitting in front of a wall of monitors, his face scarred, but his smile as sharp as ever. David explained that he had faked his own passing to escape Victoria's surveillance network, and had been living in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to execute his ultimate revenge against the entire financial establishment. He had used my software to calculate the exact structural vulnerabilities of the market, allowing him to siphon billions of euros from the collapsing Mercer empire without anyone noticing the anomaly. The massive twist came when David showed me a hidden live feed of Eleanor's federal office back in Brussels, revealing that she was actually his primary corporate partner in this entire operation. Eleanor had not hired me to stop the entity. She had used my federal investigation as a legal David offered me a third share of the new financial empire they were building, stating that with my risk management skills and his algorithmic control, we could dictate the economic future of the entire continent. If I refused, Eleanor would instantly activate a false treason file that would frame me for the entire banking crisis, ensuring I would spend the rest of my life in a maximum security federal penitentiary. I looked at Christian, who had silently connected his portable hard drive to the main server frame, while David was busy presenting his grand vision of corporate dominance. I looked David straight in the eyes and told him that his algorithm had a fatal flaw that he had completely overlooked because he forgot who taught him how to write code in the first place. Before David could react, Christian pressed the execution key on his portable drive, injecting a destructive loop directly into the heart of the server farm master processor array. The monitors across the wall began to flicker violently, the clean green lines of financial data turning into chaotic spirals of bright red error messages as the system began to delete its own core database. David screamed in rage, pulling a compact weapon from beneath his desk, but Christian tackled him to the floor before he could fire a single shot at us. The hook came when the main security doors of the control room suddenly slammed shut, locking us all inside while the automated fire suppression system began to pump carbon dioxide into the sealed chamber. Eleanor had been monitoring the server status from The air inside the central control room grew thin as the heavy gas filled the space, making it incredibly difficult to breathe or think clearly while the alarms wailed continuously. Christian managed to smash the electronic control panel on the wall using a heavy metal server bracket, creating a temporary electrical short that forced the main security doors to pop open by a few inches. We dragged ourselves out into the main corridor, leaving a defeated David behind as he scrambled to save his burning hard drives from the overheating servers. We escaped the watch factory just as the underground transformers exploded, sending a massive plume of gray smoke billowing into the quiet Zurich night. The twist occurred when my phone vibrated with a direct message from Eleanor, stating that she had already released the false treason files to Interpol, and that our faces were now We knew that staying in Switzerland was a death sentence, so we used a hidden motorized boat to cross Lake Zurich under the cover of darkness, heading toward the Austrian border through the mountain passes. Christian contacted an underground network of hacktivists who provided us with an old, unmarked delivery truck filled with obsolete medical equipment to disguise our journey through the checkpoints. As we drove through the freezing alpine night, I opened the quantum laptop which had managed to salvage a single fragment of David's master file before the servers burned down. The hook dropped when I decrypted the fragment and discovered that Eleanor was not the true leader of this conspiracy, but was actually acting on direct orders from a hidden committee of directors inside the International Settlement Bank in Basel. This hidden committee was planning to use the artificial banking crisis to force the entire European continent into a unified digital currency system that they would control completely from behind closed doors. The upcoming Friday market opening was the absolute deadline, meaning we had less than 36 hours to expose the Basel Committee before the entire economic sovereignty of the continent was permanently compromised. We arrived in Basel early Thursday morning, blending into the crowd of corporate commuters walking through the ultra-modern financial district, where the International Settlement Bank skyscraper stood. Christian managed to tap into the building's subterranean communication trunk line, giving us a live audio feed of the major twist of the morning arrived when we heard the voice of the committee chairman, which belonged to none other than my old billionaire father, who had supposedly lost his entire fortune during the original Mercer Capital collapse. My father had sacrificed Victoria and his own company as a grand gambit to position himself at the head of this global banking committee, proving that his corporate greed knew absolutely no boundaries. He was currently instructing Eleanor to finalize the digital currency launch protocol, completely unbothered by the fact that his actions would ruin the lives of millions of hardworking families across the continent. I felt a cold, unyielding rage take over my exhaustion, realizing that the final boss of this entire corporate nightmare was the very man who had brought me into the world. Sophia and Christian spent the next 12 hours designing a digital counter-strike, utilizing the quantum laptop's processing power to build a specialized decryption worm that could pierce the Basel Bank master security vault. We knew that a physical entry into the skyscraper was impossible due to the advanced biometric scanners and armed mercenary teams guarding every square inch of the property. Our only window of opportunity was to broadcast the worm directly into the bank's satellite uplink during the final committee meeting on Thursday night. We climbed to the roof of an adjacent commercial building, braving the freezing rain as Christian calibrated a high-powered directional antenna to target the bank main communication dish across the street. The hook dropped when the antenna just as the download reached 80%. The roof door behind us was kicked open by a tactical assault team wearing unmarked black combat gear and carrying silenced weapons. The leader of the team stepped forward, removing his visor to reveal Marcus Mercer, who had traded his corporate suit for tactical armor to finish his family dirty work personally. Marcus smiled, telling us that my father had offered him the position of Global Chief Operating Officer of the new digital currency system if he eliminated me and Christian tonight. The massive twist occurred when Christian pulled an emergency flare gun from his jacket and fired it directly into the bank communication dish across the street, creating a massive electrical explosion. We ran through the wet alleys of Basel, the sound of Marcus mercenaries echoing behind us as they pursued us with relentless corporate efficiency. We managed to reach a safe house inside an abandoned tram depot, where the quantum laptop finished compiling the stolen committee data, despite the damage to the antenna network. I now possessed the absolute proof of my father's global conspiracy, Eleanor corruption, and Marcus' involvement in the satellite sabotage. The hook arrived when my laptop screen suddenly flashed an incoming priority transmission from the director of the International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C., who had been secretly monitoring our investigation through a secure back channel. The director informed us that my father had already initiated the market crash sequence, 12 hours ahead of schedule, meaning the European markets would collapse in exactly. The major twist of the night hit me when the IMF director revealed that Eleanor had just authorized an elite federal strike team to breach our safe house and destroy the quantum laptop before we could broadcast the evidence. I realized that running away was no longer an option, so I decided to play the ultimate high-stakes corporate card by broadcasting the entire database directly to every major media outlet in the world simultaneously. Christian used his rogue engineering skills to hijack the local television and radio frequencies across the entire European continent, replacing the standard programming with the face of my father negotiating the artificial market crash. Within minutes, the live broadcast went viral on social media, triggering. The federal strike team arrived at our safe house just as the broadcast concluded, but instead of arresting us, their commanding officer received a direct order from the Prime Minister's office to stand down immediately. The public outrage had forced the European governments to launch an emergency independent investigation, stripping Eleanor of her federal authority and freezing the assets of every director on the Basel Committee. My father's grand gambit had collapsed in a single hour of total media exposure, his dream of a unified digital currency empire completely ruined by the very son he had tried to eliminate. Marcus Mercer was captured by local police while trying to flee across the German border in a stolen vehicle, ending his. Eleanor Vance was arrested at her luxurious desk in Brussels by a team of international prosecutors, her career over and her diplomatic immunity permanently revoked by the European Parliament. David managed to disappear into the Swiss mountains once again before the authorities could track his location, leaving behind an empty server room and a mysterious encrypted message on my personal terminal. The note simply said that a true master of risk never relies on a single algorithm, suggesting that he had already moved a substantial portion of the stolen funds into a completely untraceable offshore network. I walked out of the tram depot safe house into the calm morning light, knowing that while the immediate economic crisis had been averted, the corporate underworld would always find a way to rebuild its shadow networks. Three weeks later, I was formally invited to the Grand Assembly Hall of the European Parliament in Strasbourg, where the remaining heads of state were gathering to rebuild the financial regulatory framework of the continent. The President of the Commission stepped forward, presenting me with the highest civilian honor for corporate integrity and offering me the position of chairman of the new European Financial Stability Board. This role would give me the ultimate authority to monitor, audit, and regulate every single banking conglomerate operating from Madrid to Berlin, ensuring that a conspiracy like my father's could never happen again. I looked out at the massive applause from the international audience, feeling a sense of deep accomplishment, but the hook dropped when my assistant. Inside the red folder was a newly filed corporate registration document showing that a massive international conglomerate named Vance Global Trust had just been established in London. The master shareholder list was completely hidden behind a complex wall of anonymous trust funds, but the digital signature used to authorize the multi-billion euro capitalization was unmistakably my father's private encryption key. The shocking twist was that my father had managed to leverage his hidden assets to negotiate a secret plea deal with the British authorities, allowing him to avoid prison by turning over his remaining committee partners while keeping his secret wealth intact. He was no longer in a federal cell, but was currently sitting in a private penthouse in Mayfair, preparing. I realized in that definitive moment that the corporate jungle never truly sleeps, and that biological bloodlines would always find a way to return to the battlefield of immense wealth and power. Sophia and Christian stood beside me as I took the oath of office, their expressions hardening into total resolve as they saw the data inside the red folder. We had won the battle for Frankfurt, Zurich, and Basel, but the true war for the financial soul of the Vance dynasty was only just beginning on a much larger global stage. I walked to the central podium of the Parliament Hall, looking directly into the main television camera, knowing that my father was watching the live broadcast from his luxury penthouse in London. I delivered my inaugural speech with absolute confidence, announcing an immediate, comprehensive forensic audit of every single anonymous trust fund operating within the United Kingdom, effectively declaring an all-out corporate war on my father's new empire before he could even launch his first hostile takeover attempt. As the cameras flashed and the audience cheered, my phone buzzed with a final text message from an unlisted number containing a real-time video of Julianne standing on a private yacht in Greece, holding a glass of champagne and smiling as she watched my speech on a digital screen, proving that in this high-stakes game of corporate drama, the players might change their locations, but the pursuit of total dominance never truly ends.